My name is Darcy, and today we're going to make some DIY mini specimen jars, just in time for spooky season. If you picked up a kit, you should have a small glass spice jar, a packet of tea, a sheet of label templates, a paintbrush, a small container of antique Mod Podge, a plastic critter, and a plastic bag. You'll also need a pair of scissors, a fine-tipped pen, a few paper towels, and access to water. So the very first thing we're going to do is actually work on our label because we're going to tea stain it. Let's get started. So before we stain any kind of paper or anything, we have to first decide which label we want to use. Now, these little specimen jars are supposed to be a little bit spooky. So you can pick whichever one you like, or you can make your own entirely. You don't have to use these, but I'm going to go ahead and use this big one. I'll trim it out. Okay, now that I've trimmed out my label, the next thing we will do is dye it. So you need to get a very small cup of water. You only need maybe a fourth of a cup of water in some kind of cup that you can make tea in, basically. It doesn't have to be hot water, it can be whatever. So these are just old tea packets that we had that have kind of expired. So they're all different kinds of tea, so they'll be different colors. But I have been steeping one of these bags of tea for about 15 minutes already. So this is the color it is, and you see I've got very little water in there. But it's turning this kind of lovely, weird golden brown. And you can let this tea steep as long as you want, but I think it's probably at a decent color for us. So what we're going to do is take our paper towels and kind of set them out. We're going to take the label that we want to use. We haven't written anything on it yet because our ink isn't waterproof. And what I'm going to do is actually take the tea bag out of here, squeeze it out a little bit, and then I'm going to blot it all over my label. I'm not going to dump out the tea. We're actually going to use that in our jar just because it's already kind of a weird color. But we're just going to get our label all wet with this tea. It's not going to change the color hugely dramatically at all, especially because these are herbal teas. But it is going to change the color enough that it's not quite so bright a white, because this is just printer paper. So we'll get it really well saturated, but be careful not to rip it. And we're just going to let this sit and dry until it is completely dry. It's going to wrinkle up a little bit, but that's also going to kind of give it a bit of an older feeling. And we're not going to dump out our water. I'm actually going to dump the tea bag back in there because why not? And we're going to let it dry completely. So we'll come back when this is fully dry. It's been about an hour and my label is now totally dry. So it's wrinkled a little bit. The color is kind of this antiqued paper color. It hasn't changed super dramatically, but if we look at it compared to a piece of just the printer paper, it definitely looks more aged at this point, and that's what we were going for. Not a huge, crazy change. So now that my label is dry, I'm going to go ahead and write my label, whatever I want to put on there. So the creature that I have in my kit is this little black bug, but I'm going to keep it nice and vague and kind of spiky, just because I think that looks spooky. So I'm going to put just kind of scratchy and random numbers. I think this looks spooky, but if you want to be specific, or if you want to put something kind of, less sciencey and more, frog guts or whatever on there, Halloween themed, go for it. This is your weird little specimen jar. It can look like whatever you want. So now that our label is ready to roll, we are actually going to work on our jar. So we can set aside our weird tea for the time being and get our jar, our Mod Podge, and we'll need our paintbrush for sure. You keep the label close by, but you don't need it right now. So we're going to unscrew this lid, and what we're going to do is paint the outside of our jar with the Mod Podge. It's going to be a little bit streaky. This Mod Podge dries to a kind of hazy look. So it's going to make things look kind of old and weird. And I'm going to cover the entire outside. I probably won't bother with the bottom, so there's a way for it to dry. And then we'll let everything dry. And if you don't like the way that the stripes of your paintbrush work, you can also dab it on with your paper towel. You just take a chunk of paper towel, put it in your Mod Podge, and kind of glop it on there. It'll give you a different texture. You might get bubbles with this, so just be aware of that. If you really don't like how the bubbles would look, don't do this one. So I have dabbed my paint on one side and I've kind of streaked it with the paintbrush on the other side. So just so we can see what that's going to turn out as. As you can see, actually, we've already got some of this Mod Podge that I put on lightly is already drying. And you can definitely still see through the glass. It's just kind of a hazy look now, which is what we wanted, just to give it a little bit of spookiness. So we're going to actually let this dry completely, and then we're going to use a little bit more of a Mod Podge to adhere the label. If you want, you can stick the label on at this point, but I like seeing how it's going to turn out, and then I can kind of decide where I might want to put my label. So I would recommend you pick one of these styles of putting on your Mod Podge, so either stripes or dabbing, just depending on what you like better. But we'll come back when this is dry in just a few minutes. So our jar is almost completely dry, and I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see this on camera, but we do have two kind of different finishes from our different styles of painting. So this is the stripy side. You can see the little lines that show up. It definitely does have a very particular texture to it. It's interesting. And then if we come over to this side, it's not quite dry on the bottom there. It's a little more organic looking, maybe. It's definitely got the little blotches, but it's just kind of whatever really works best for you. So now we are going to attach the label, which we will do with our Mod Podge. So we will put a thin layer of Mod Podge on the back of our label. You need to make sure you get the little edges. Probably want to put paper towels down first. And once it is coated, we are going to stick it on where we want it. So I think I like my speckledy side better. So I'm going to put it right about there. Now, if you want, you can give this another coat of your antique Mod Podge. Just go lightly over the label because it can tear if it gets too wet, basically. But that'll make sure everything stays sealed. I'm going to go ahead and leave it. I'm not really going to, this is going to live on a shelf once it's done. I'm not going to be messing around with it too much, so I don't need the paper to be sealed. But Mod Podge is a sealant, so if you wanted to cover it up again, it would kind of give it a slightly more antique look. You have plenty of Mod Podge to do that, but we're not going to worry about it. So that is the outside of our jar done. So now we're going to worry about our filling. So you have a critter, and if you want, you can just toss your plastic critter in there, pour in your tea water, and fill it up most of the rest of the way with liquid and seal it, and you're done. But we also have a plastic bag. So the thinking with the plastic bag is that you can shred off little bits of it if you want and either attach them to your critter, you can tie them on there or just wrap it around, or just have them floating in the water too, and it kind of adds another air of creepiness. If you rip a plastic bag, it gives you these kind of weird wiggly edges that look pretty interesting. So I don't think it'll read particularly like a plastic bag in your specimen jar. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to rip off some bits and see if we can attach them to our bug. So I've got a few little strips here that I've pulled off. And you see they definitely look strange, right? So I think I'm just gonna wrap them around a little bit. I don't want to do too much. I just want it to be a little bit, right? Just a little odd. and the water will affect this. So if you put it in there and you decide it does not look good with the extra plastic bag bits in there, or you decide you want to add more, you can always unscrew it. You can seal these closed with glue, but if you're not going to mess around with them too much, you might as well just leave it open so you can get in there and change things up if you like. So we're just going to wrap some little bits in there, and I'm going to toss in an extra one. This one should probably float. Stick it in there. Stick my bug in with his bits. And now I'm going to fill up my jar. So I saved my tea water. I'm going to add that in first. And I'll need a little bit of extra water as well. So I'm going to go ahead and top it off. Not 100% up to the top, but pretty high. Just about to that edge. And then it's just a matter of screwing it closed really tightly. And that is my creepy little specimen. So I really think that this plastic bag works really well. It makes it look super eerie, especially with the tea water, so you can kind of only see a little bit of what's going on at a time. You're welcome to glue the lid closed if you want, so before you screw it on, or once you've checked it to make sure it looks how you want, it looks good, you like the color of the water, you like how it looks, you can open it up again. Apply Mod Podge all around here on your screw section of this glass. And then before it dries, screw your lid on really tightly and then let it dry completely and don't unscrew it. This should seal it up pretty decently well. But if you decide not to seal it, you can always change the color of the water. If you have food coloring at home, you can make it kind of green and creepy. If you have really tiny glow sticks, or you find this somewhere, you can always attach one, crack one, attach it to the underside of your lid with some tape or something, and then you have an extra spooky specimen jar for a little while. The liquid in those does not last very long. But really, even just on its own with the tea water, this is pretty gruesome. And you definitely have enough of the antique Mod Podge to do this with any spare jars you have at home. If you want to give yourself a whole host of creepy little specimen critters, you have the tools that you need now. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this craft, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a good day.